have to confess, with age I find myself increasingly more cynical about the world we live in. The news headlines rarely improve, many things don't change, or man just reverts to type. And Isaiah, in chapter 24 of his book, uses a catalogue of startling words to describe the society in which he finds himself. He describes it as being ruined, withered, devastated, defiled, broken, cursed, joyless, battered. You're probably wondering what side of the bed Isaiah got out of, but on a bad day, I think we'd all admit that doesn't that planet seem like that? Paul suggests that the whole creation groans in bondage to decay, waiting its liberation. And before Isaiah talks about that liberation, the amazing hope that God has promised, first he unpacks what this world city looks like, this representative society that pushes God to the sidelines and does its own thing. Isaiah says such a society will inevitably descend into a wasteland. It won't matter who we are, God's judgment will overtake us. Listen to what he says in verse 1. He just summarizes. He says, "See, the Lord is going to lay waste the earth and devastate it. He will ruin its face and scatter its inhabitants." Perhaps it's surprising that it's God himself who will make everything a wasteland, even life itself. The passage even suggests that even wine will lose its sparkle. He continues at the end of that chapter. He says, the floodgates of heaven are opened. The foundations of the earth shake. The earth is broken up. The earth is split asunder. The earth is violently shaken. The earth reels like a drunkard. It sways like a hut in the wind. So heavy upon it is the guilt of its rebellion that it falls never to rise again. There's a clue to God's intentions here. He's shaking the world because of its rebellion through various inescapable judgments, to wake us up to him, to bring us to our senses. Motia claims helpfully that the world is impenetrably unaware of God. What an indictment of God's creatures that is. Did you ever stop to think about how insulting it is to the living God to live as if he's not there? How preposterous that we attempt to find meaning in all the good things he's given us without him, when all these things are designed to point back to him. See, God's judgments always have a purpose to win us back, so that we return to him with all our heart and enjoy life with him at the centre of our lives. That's what he always intended. Yet Isaiah says here that the curse of the fall consumes the earth. Isaiah is shocked by the judgments. In fact, he bursts into tears twice in recent chapters at the devastation that God will cause. He wrestles with this concept of God's justice. And yet our world cries out for justice, doesn't it? We want God to hold others accountable for their wrongdoing, especially if they wrong us. We gladly point the finger. And one day we know that nothing will be undetected. Every wrong will be put right. And that's incredibly comforting thought to those who've been wronged. But it's a disturbing thought for all wrongdoers. And the reality is that we are both. We are both victims of wrongdoing, crying out for justice, and we are perpetrators of hurts to other people, crying out for mercy. Moore adds this, that these events are both microscopic and telescopic, are little judgment days that point towards a greater judgment day. The world's cities' days are numbered. One day God will judge the world. Hope in the wasteland. If your life occasionally feels like a wasteland, don't despair. Hang on. There's good news coming. You see, we've seen already glimpses of the messianic figure in Isaiah 6 and in the vision of the holiness of God, the root of Jesse in Isaiah chapter 11, this righteous one. And he is the only ray of hope in this devastating wasteland. Among withered people is in the wasteland is a mountain. And in this chapter 25, he's saying, "And on this mountain, Mount Zion, hope will emerge for all peoples, all nations." It says, "On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats and the finest of wines." See, Isaiah here is using imagery of a feast or a banquet to describe God's rich transformative salvation from the wasteland. And on this mountain, he continues, he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Messiah, the righteous one who was to come on that mountain, one day will destroy the shroud that enfolds all people, i.e. death. All humanity lives under this oppressive shroud of death, a mourning that lingers. That wrapping shroud with its wailing will be destroyed for those who trust in the Lord. And of course he's pointing to the cross of Jesus at that Easter weekend all those years ago. Yet more than death, he will conquer the sin that leads to death. He will break the power of the curse in one fell swoop. Moore states this, he says that another reason to celebrate God's judgment is his commitment to rooting out every last vestige of sin is necessary for the refounding of the new and better Mount Zion. You see, in Jesus' sacrifice, he swallows up death forever. He inflicts the death blow to the ancient serpent, destroying the works of the devil. His people's disgrace from withering in the wasteland will be removed, and their tears from the pain will be personally, tenderly wiped away. God relieves us of the burden of rebellion's guilt when we come to him. He bore the shame of our failure when we bow the knee to him, and he'll take away our fear of judgment by drinking the cup of God's wrath himself that we should face. It's a beautiful picture of the rich salvation that God brings to hurting, broken, lost people like you and me. Such salvation brings us beholding our God, leaving us captivated and passionate to live for his honour with him at the centre. And then finally, in the last two chapters, I'm just summarising, he talks about God's city blossoms into a fruitful vineyard. You see, he doesn't want us to live in the wasteland. He wants us to live like a fruitful vineyard. And he paints two provocative pictures here. One of a strong city, secure with its gates wide open, inviting sinners to enter it through the salvation offered from the mountain of God that Easter. He says, in that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God makes salvation its walls and ramparts. So there was no song in the wasteland, but there is in God's city. And then he talks about this imagery of a flourishing vineyard. He says, in that day, sing about a fruitful vineyard. I, the Lord, watch over it. I water it continually. I guard it day and night so no one may harm it. In days to come, Jacob will take root, Israel will bud and blossom and fill all the world with fruit. The imagery of this fruitful vineyard is, instead of being devastated like in chapter 5, here it's blossoming under God's care, watering, nurturing and protection. Such imagery, says Isaiah, should cause God's people to burst into song, although it's as if Isaiah feels this tension between the joy of salvation and the ache of sinners still lost in the wasteland. And there's this tension that we live with. We're called to be in the world but not of the world, says Jesus. We straddle two cities, the world city and his God's city. God's rule is God's city, and it's his rule is beginning to blossom in the lives of those who've welcomed Jesus the Saviour. Yet we all struggle and wrestle with the surrounding world city of rebellion that drags us down. These passages here, they're messy, and I actually think it's a literary device to remind us that living life is complicated and messy. We live in the now and the not yet. We live with this tension and brokenness, but hope comes from trusting God alone. So perhaps joy and sadness should flood our hearts at the same time. Joy that God is gathering and establishing a people for himself from the wastelands, and don't miss out, be one of those people. But sadness because so many continue in the wasteland, unaware of God, unaware of the storm clouds of judgment that loom large. May we have hope in the wasteland today. Our hope is God alone. I'm your host of Bundoran Bible Reflections. Have a great week.